So you got your games already?
They're all right here in front of me, ready for action.
Cool. We'll see how we do. See where we get to.
Exactly. I'm gearing up for a CRT road trip this weekend.
Oh yeah, where are you gonna go? What are you gonna get?
Going up to Hamburg, so it's like a 5-hour drive.
Oh wow!
But
must be a good CRT.
I'm doing it because it's an NEC XM29, one of their multi-format style displays. So it does 15 kilohertz, 24 kilohertz, 31 kilohertz. So it basically works like a VGA monitor, but it also supports 240p, 480i, and things like X68K input and all that. It's quite beautiful.
That's cool.
But they're hard to track down, but somebody's offering one.
What's it going to cost you?
I'm trading
a
monitor that I have, an OLED monitor, a different type of OLED monitor.
Wow.
That I've had for a while. Because I'm using the Sony 480 hertz OLED monitor now, so I have another one that I can trade. And they're like, I think it's just the NEC is huge. It's 29-inch tube.
Right.
And it's a big, boxy thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know how those pro monitors tend to be. So, but I needs it.
Yeah. I hear you. Hello and welcome to Insert Credit. This is a different kind of show. This time, it's just me and one other person. It's John Linneman. Hello.
Hey, good to be back here. Although this time we're meeting remotely.
Yeah, we're meeting remotely, not over a delightful Caesarea meal. John Linneman from DigitalFoundry, of course. We have had conversations previously about old weird video games and decided that we would do it again because we'd been wanting to do it again basically since the first time we did it.
Yep.
And so the theme is games that have something interesting about them, games with a little story behind them or something of note. And we've got 10 each. We'll see if we get to 10. And yeah, we're gonna show and tell and have a little bit of a time. So that's the plan. Thanks for being here, John, all the way from Germany.
I've got this whole stack of games in front of me now, so
we're ready for action.
What's it going to be?
So I'll start. All
right.
So I'm going to go with Tomak Save the Earth Again for the GP32. Are you familiar with this one?
I must admit, you've got me. The GP32 is a blind spot of mine.
Okay.
I'm familiar with the console, but I've never gotten into that one. So
yeah, so the GP32 was it was a Korean exclusive, basically handheld game console by Game Park.
Game Park.
And I was real tight with Game Park back in the day. A lot of insert credit reportage on their stuff. And Tomak Save the Earth Again is a very Metal Slug-like graphic scrolling shooter, horizontal scrolling shooter.
Oh, interesting.
And it looks really good, and it's about a goddess who is a head in a pot, and she's saving the earth. So it's essentially the sequel to Tomak Save the Earth, the visual novel, where this head in a pot is sent down to Earth to prove that humans can love, even if you're just a head in a pot, because otherwise the world, humanity is going to get destroyed.
I like that.
Yeah, so you have to fall in love with this head in a pot or else. And so this was the like pseudo sequel on the GP32, and it's actually a pretty decent game. And weirdly, I think I influenced the development of this game a bit because they sent me a preview ROM and it had a variety of little issues or things that I thought could be improved. I wrote a preview to that effect, and then they fixed all of those things before the final product. And it was like the only preview. I was the only person they sent it to.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, it was a very weird time. So, Tomak Save the Earth Again. That's my first one. It's an odd game. It's more interesting to look at and think about than to actually play. But I do like it, and I think it's one of the better, probably in the top 3 of the games on the GP32.
Do you recommend somebody get into the GP32 in this day and age?
No, okay. I wouldn't. It has a lot of real like cheap free library sounding sound effects and stuff.
Oh boy.
It's very tinkly sounding, kind of like it's like a feature phone from the early 2000s kind of a vibe.
I see.
But it had some neat stuff, but I think it's only for the real sickos. Like,
was it actually performant, like smooth scrolling, etc.?
Relatively performant, I would say.
Okay.
It was not fantastic, but it was pretty good. It was similar to a GBA in some ways, but with much higher resolution. It was a lot like the Korean PC games of the era in terms of performance, actually, or of like a few years before that, where they were like still making games for Windows 98.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think it's worth doing it would be worth you doing a video about it. I don't know if it would be worth it for everyone.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I mean, if it at least runs better than like the Garake style games from that area on cell phones and stuff, which were all
for sure. No, it's
pretty choppy, right? You like, oh, sweet, they brought a PC Genjin to a phone, and it's like 5 FPS.
Yeah,
you're like,
yeah,
nope.
No, it's pretty decent. Pretty decent. It's all definitely right. They considered it a 32-bit console, and they
That's
can
cool.
basically claim. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, you're up.
All right, here we go. So I wanted to do this one because I just think it's such a weird thing. So it's a game from Taito.
Nice.
Pyramid Intruder for the 3DO. And the reason I like this one is because it's one of those weird things where it's kind of like a port of a game from the Mega LD. So I forget, it was Pyramid. It was a different name.
Yeah, I literally just saw it in a store like 2 weeks ago. And
oh my goodness.
I texted Chris Kohler and I was like, do you have this one? I want to make sure you got this one because it's here and it's 20% off. But he did. He, in fact, then sent me Pyramid Patrol. Pyramid Patrol,
that's what it is.
And then he sent me a photo that he happened to have taken that day of his complete collection of like Mega LD.
Oh man, look at that.
Games. So
Sasuga.
Yeah.
that's very Chris Kohler. I love it.
Yep.
Unfortunately, the Mega LD is a bit spicy for me, so I had to settle for this no, maybe not better. Laserdisc video is pretty good quality, but this is a reasonable facsimile of Pyramid Patrol for the 3DO. And this was still at a period when companies were investing in these sort of rail shooter style games.
Yeah.
I mean, it was around 95 or so, I guess. This version was 95. So you had stuff on the PC like The Hive.
Yeah.
And like there was all kinds of like random rail shooter games, and that's what this is, essentially flying through this it's like sci-fi pyramids, shooting down sprites on a rail. Of course, on the Laserdisc, it was just a Laserdisc playing the video. Everything overlaid on top of it was sprites.
Right.
On 3DO, I feel like it blends a little better though, because the video quality and the sprites, there's less of a mismatch between them.
Yeah. Because
you have more colors on 3DO for the sprite layer versus the Mega LD. But either way, Taito was into some of these weird types of games at the time, and it's not the only rail shooter they would do, but it's definitely an interesting one, and one of the few games that they released on the 3DO.
3DO is so weird.
It is, dude. It's so weird, but
so weird that
it's such a fascinating. And I also wanted to mention that because I'm just testing a mod for the 3DO. So the PixelFX gem has been adapted to work on the 3DO. So I finally have a 3DO with pure digital video output.
Oh.
And so you get raw HDMI out. It's super clean. And in addition, the author or the creator of the PixelFX gem, I encouraged him to play around with overclocking. As far as I can tell, nobody's really done this. They've done this through emulators and it improves performance, but on real hardware, not so much. He got it working. So by soldering a single wire to the gem, you can actually control clock speed on the 3DO now.
Oh, wow.
And you can boost the frequency enough to dramatically improve performance in games.
Oh, wow.
So to the point where stuff like Doom is suddenly playable.
Does it mess anything up? Does it make some things run too fast?
Some games can be weird. So it seems like it's something, he's still playing with it. So some games might need to be clocked lower, others can go higher, but it's all variable and you can adjust that as needed.
It's cool.
I think this is like we're entering a brave new era of 3DO where like we could actually see some of the issues with performance like solved on real hardware.
Nice.
I think you may need some extra cooling on there though, like a nice heat sink or something, because it's probably driving it a little bit beyond what it's intended to do, but still very promising.
Liquid cooled 3DO.
Exactly. Liquid cooled 3DO. It's time. All right.
I happen to have a rail shooter in reach, Scavenger 4 for the,
oh my goodness.
for the FM Towns
From
Marty.
Psygnosis.
Yeah. It's the Marty version of Scavenger 4. I didn't know there were that many scavengers, to be honest. But there it is. That wasn't one of the games I was going to show. It was just up there.
That Scavenger 4 though is actually just a conversion of Nova Storm.
Oh right.
Which was the Psygnosis joint, but in Japan it was called Scavenger 4. So
yeah, it's weird.
And Nova Storm was one of those games that if you had a CD-ROM drive, you were going to get Nova Storm whether you liked it or not, right?
Yeah.
Like that was just something that was happening.
Yeah, the blending thing that you mentioned reminds me of how well Sylpheed for the Sega CD blends on over RF or any of or even composite. Yeah, because I thought it was all 3D when I was playing it as a youth, but it's actually over FMV. But the FMV looks really sharp because there's no colors. Because it's so low color that they didn't have to worry about, like, the colors were the problem on the Sega CD.
And by going with flat shaded polygons, you kind of solve that problem, right?
Yep.
So
yep. Very smart. Okay, my next one, Congo, the movie, The Lost City of Zinj. Have you ever looked at this one?
I have indeed.
So,
I remember being fascinated by this whole thing, just Congo specifically, because
yeah.
I enjoyed the book. This was post Jurassic Park, so of course it's also Michael Crichton era, right? And I was like, oh, they're going to do a movie adaptation of this as well, and games.
Yeah, and this game is a US only Saturn release, which is
US only. I didn't realize that.
US only, and it's a first person shooter with limited 3D in it, and reviewers complained that the enemies were too cartoonish, and they for sure are. But the thing that's interesting to me about it is I would love for someone to look this up and prove me wrong, but I believe this to be the first-person shooter that stars a black person. Like, the protagonist is part of an African expedition, but he is an African guy. And
interesting.
It just really, it surprised me for 1996. You're watching the intro FMV, and there's this guy who's like, I've been going days without food, and he's like talking to his employer who sent him there to like get these diamonds and figure out whatever's going on with these apes. And you watch him like declining, and he's like in rougher and rougher shape. And then because of how things were in the 90s, I kept expecting like he dies and then you go after him. But no, then suddenly you're him. You're the guy. You start the game with a fever because you've been all messed up, and things are like yellow and weird, and then you're him, and then at the end of the game, spoilers, he keeps all the diamonds, moves to Houston, and buys the company that sent him there, and becomes like a telecommunications mogul. It's very, very odd. But I believe first black protagonist in a first-person shooter. Pretty sure.
It's wild. I never actually made enough progress in this game because just remember the opening level was just like, first of all, it's ambitious because they're trying to do a jungle area on the Saturn.
Yeah.
Which is insane to even attempt that. So there's actually like foliage everywhere, but it's fairly limited. But there's just like insects and animals that just like get right up in your face.
Yeah, they appear just like out of the foliage, just like suddenly there. And there's some that disappear. They turn invisible.
So this always led me to wonder then, for the first level of John Romero's Daikatana, were they inspired by Congo? With having flying insects and frogs and such that just buzz around the screen and annoy you. It just feels like
must have been
the straight line. But Still, I have to give them respect for attempting to do a jungle environment on Sega Saturn. That's a tall order.
And they still have like elevators and stuff in there, but they're just dirt. It's just dirt that moves up and down for no reason.
Nice.
It's
amazing.
Good stuff.
All right. So moving on then.
Yeah.
This is a game that I bought back in the day. This is my original copy. And it's interesting for a couple reasons. So this is, first of all, it's the first Game Arts game I played. It is
Thexder.
The American PC version of Thexder.
Nice.
And it's actually got the two brothers here on the back, pictured in the corner.
Oh, wow.
Which I thought was really interesting at the time. And, this was for our IBM 8086. So this was post NES. I was already familiar with that, but I liked our PC. It was fun to play around with. This did not look amazing by any stretch of the imagination, but as it turns out, these guys came up with a really interesting, that mechanic for sort of scanning the laser fire around on enemies is really good when you're playing on a platform with fairly low frame rate. So they basically figured out how to do a platforming side-scroll action game in a way that doesn't require the same kind of precision you might need for a 60 FPS, like 8-bit NES style game, right? Mm-hmm. And it works. But I wanted to mention this because this box served me well, because I actually used this box to transport two art projects for grade school to school in. So I put them inside the box to protect the art project, and I took it to school. And so this game has that weird connection of I remember taking my Thexder box to school. And
it's amazing it's in such good shape, frankly.
I kept all my old PC boxes, weirdly enough. I'm glad I did. And I even put the things I put the disc back in there just for safekeeping.
Yeah.
It's a 720 kilobyte one, so 720K instead of it's a double density as they called it, rather than the 1.44 meg style
big
disc.
Boy.
But yeah, this was a cool game, and I went on to keep an eye on Thexder over the years. Sierra did another release in the 90s for Windows 95. If you remember that one.
No, I don't.
Oh, dude. Okay, so for that one, they went full pre-rendered, right?
Oh.
And because it was Windows 95, they decided, hey, what if the HUD, the map, the gameplay screen were all broken up into their own individual windows, each with a title bar, which was a trend for about 6 months where games were made where hey, we're going to, because it's Windows 95, wouldn't it be cool if you could see that you're in Windows while playing the game? Mm-hmm. And so everything was windowed.
Neat. Yeah, I really like when, to your earlier point, when developers find a way to hide the limitations of a platform through design.
Exactly.
There's some platforms where you're going to have lag. And so if you make the player perform something, I can't give too much away because that's something that we were working on recently, but if you give the player a scenario that hides lag in their brains,
right?
That you can totally do that. There are ways where it's okay, I don't expect this thing that I'm doing to be 1-to-1, and so you can fool people into thinking that everything's fine with design. I think it's cool when people do that. Exactly.
So I think that's stuff super cool. This is also the first game I remember seeing on the back of the box. They actually have Japanese written, which now it says if you clear the screen without your shield, you get bonus points written, but it's not translated.
Oh wow!
And it's just, I don't know why they put this on here, and I don't think that they know either. They just left it because it probably looked cool, but it really has no. I mean, it does tell you what's going on the screens, but it has no relation to what's going on here.
Yeah,
and I think that's so funny. But yeah, this was the first time I played a Game Arts game. So,
very good.
And I love Game Arts. And since you mentioned Stillfeed earlier, it's the second time Game Arts has been brought up today.
Yeah, I almost thought about putting in Grandia Digital Museum or one of those or something.
Oh yeah, that's great. I love Grandia stuff.
But I didn't. Okay, right. My next one will be the biggest foreheads of all time. First Kiss Monogatari for the PCFX.
Big brained.
I really, really dislike this art. Pretty aggressively. It's not a game that I like, It's a dating sim with these ladies with the giant domes,
giant foreheads.
But the thing that's cool about it is it has hidden inside of it the PCFX's only fighting game, or at least side-on fighting game. Technically, you've got like Battle Heat and Cutie Honey, which were the like FMV based like pseudo fighting sort of things,
like Supreme Warrior.
But this actually has a three character 1-on-1 2-player with AI fighting game with moves and everything, and it actually plays pretty well. And I bring this up because I love games that have other games hidden inside of them.
Yeah.
You know, Tokimeki Memorial on the PC Engine had, what did it have? It had a
there was a shooter in one of them.
Had a shooter that
Konami shooter
was a known Konami shooter, but I can't remember which one it was.
Something Gear, maybe? I can't remember.
No. There's like Psycho Chaser was in another PC Engine game. There's a bunch of these in PC Engine games, and like almost every version of Zero Divide has a weird version of Phalanx in it. I think there's only one that doesn't have a Phalanx, and that's neat and strange. There's like one of them has like a mini Phalanx, and your ship is like super, super tiny. I think that's the Saturn one. But yeah, and this is from Hunex, and Hunex was the collaboration between Hudson and NEC, and weirdly, Hunex survived both Hudson and NEC's game division, and is still going today. They're actually publishing stuff.
Okay, that's actually pretty nuts.
Yeah, they are kind of getting back into, like, they actually contacted us about potentially doing like an indie release in Japan and stuff. It didn't wind up doing it, but it's very interesting that they're still out there. They're the surviving entity of the PC Engine, essentially. So there we go. That's what I got. First Kiss Monogatari.
Next up, because I've gotten into the system recently and I realized how cool this is, Galactic Pinball for Virtual Boy.
Nice.
Have you played this one?
I haven't. I've actually never played a real Virtual Boy, but I was just watching a terrible movie called Techno Warriors.
Oh, dude, yes.
Right before this call, which only has a DVD release in Italy, and dude straps a whole. They took apart a Virtual Boy and strapped the whole dang thing to the poor guy's face, and he's like moving around with it like it's a real thing you could put on your head. Rough. But go ahead, Virtual Pinball.
Yes. So right before the Virtual Boy in 1994, so Nintendo, of course, released Super Metroid, right?
Yeah.
That team pretty much went on and said, you know what, wouldn't it be cool if we made a pinball game? So it's pretty much the same staff that did Super Metroid, then did a pinball game for Virtual Boy. And it's freaking rad. And in fact, the composer of Super Metroid was the guy who, he did music for this, but he also directed the game, which is really interesting. Yeah. So it was his one chance to try directing a game. And the thing I discovered about the Virtual Boy is that the screen is incredible looking in a way that is surprising even today. When you peer into that thing, it feels like a void of black. Because it's black around the edges, the bezels don't stand out. It just looks like you're looking into a black field and there's a floating red image in the middle. But due to the way the image works and is scanned out, it actually has the motion clarity of a CRT. So there's zero blur, which is unbelievable for a device from that era. That's like, you know, a portable thing like this. So that instantly drew me in. It's very bright. It's very clear in motion and very crisp. And so you play a game on this thing and it just feels unlike anything else that you could really imagine. And emulators and such don't really capture the same feeling that you get from seeing the real thing. And this system also has this like effect of doing like a surround sound effect kind of thing, where the music, the sound effects all kind of play out around your head virtually. It's very hard to really understand why and how that works, but it freaking does. And when you play this game,
spatial stereo audio stuff, it's really neat.
Really good. It's really good. And the speakers are way better than I expected. And due to the width of the unit, it sort of really is. It spreads out around you very nicely. This game takes good advantage of it. Like right away, it just kicks you in the teeth with sound. And you're like, whoa.
It's also cool how the sound chip has like PC Engine vibes, pretty strong PC Engine vibes.
It's like PC Engine Plus.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It can do a lot more than the PC Engine chip, but it sounds very PC Engine-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And like most of the games that I've played on here have superb music. It just sounds awesome, this system. And so I'm really kind of like, playing games like this really made me wonder, like, what could they have done to find success in the market with Virtual Boy? I think not calling it Virtual Boy for one would have helped, because being associated as like, hey, this is the next Game Boy probably didn't help, because that really kind of sets up expectations that it's something else. Maybe there is no world where it could succeed, but either way, it's super, super cool. I like this system.
An easier method of using it would have been the thing that they needed, because it is hard. It is hard to. You can't really strap it to your head. You got to like put it on the tripod and put your face into it.
One of the things that didn't probably exist much back then is the arrival of electronic standing desks that go up and down, which I use, and that turned out to be like the ultimate accessory for Virtual Boy. You just raise it up exactly where you need it, and you're good to go.
A guy who worked on Demon School, he created a contraption that would lower it from a bunk onto his face in his bed.
Oh my goodness,
which is pretty
luxurious.
Awesome. Yeah. Have you seen the multi-cart?
Yes, with the e-ink screen.
Yeah, with the e-ink screen, it looks so good. Like,
that's unbelievable.
Yeah. So for those who are not aware, the Virtual Boy has basically an exposed cartridge back, and so this multi-cart, when you select the game, it shows like an e-ink label essentially on the cartridge, and it really looks like cyberpunk future. It's like 90s future, so it's really perfect for the Virtual Boy.
It's truly remarkable. That's how you can play things like the Street Fighter 2 port on Virtual Boy, which is really impressive.
Yeah.
There's also the cartridge. It's not pins. It's like reverse from normal. But there's these little like black pieces of plastic that you put on the cartridges to sort of protect them, right?
Yeah.
I only realized after reading through the manual for the Virtual Boy itself that there's two little notches on the top of the unit. It's a little stand for the black piece of plastic. You're supposed to set it on top of the Virtual Boy while playing. So
that's cute. That's cute. They thought of everything.
They really did. And then there's even accessories in the manuals and pamphlets that show cool things that could have happened but did not. So, oh well. But anyway.
What could have been? Well, since we talked about pinball, let's discuss Screamin' Mad George's Paranoiascape. You know this one?
I've heard of that. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't have that one though, but yes.
Screamin' Mad George was, and it's the imagery is bizarre. We got, ladies' faces in legs. We got skeleton bones swinging other bones. Just a man with a snake head man. Anyway, it's weird. Screamin' Mad George was an effects artist, and still is, I guess. He worked on some Hollywood projects. He worked on a lot of Japanese projects as well. He is a Japanese guy, and this was that era of like Japanese video games where they were like, let's try it. Let's give this guy a shot. It's published by everyone's favorite publisher, Matilda. We all know all the Matilda games. Very, very, very popular game publisher. I think their logo is a squirrel. It looks a lot like the Emotion logo with a squirrel instead of a Moai head. Anyway, this game is a first-person pinball game. You are moving into the screen, and the flippers are visible on each side, and they are skeletons swinging big bones, and you're trying to bonk like a spirit orb sort of thing into enemies, and it's real weird. It's not very good. It sounds like
the tank for the 3DO.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of that, except with all the very odd visuals, which are the main point of it. And it's one of those things that's much better to watch than play. So I recommend people check it out for the visuals. But 1998 on PlayStation. Why
1998
not? 1998.
Look at that.
It's pretty relative later than you would think for this. Yeah, it's a weird one, and I think I miss that era when they there was just like, okay, here's a popular-ish person. Let's let them make a video game. Like Keita Amemiya, the creator of the Zeiram movies and Hokkaido, and did a whole bunch of Sentai stuff. He directed a video game. He directed Nanatsukaze no something Monogatari.
I have
the one
That's
where
great for Saturn. That's beautiful.
For Saturn. It's just a really beautiful pixel art. You're a dragon walking around, adventure game. It's like
Masaya Matsuda
Mm-hmm.
with he obviously did Power Appa and all that, but also there was Metamore Jupiter and everything before that he was involved with on the sound side, and basically artists, musicians, and other media people getting involved in games. It was like, hey, this is like, it felt like the most CD-ROM thing ever.
Exactly.
It's like, dude, we got CD-ROMs. Let's do it.
Yeah, and it was kind of like games at that time still had like envy for other media. They were still like feeling like the younger brother, and so if they could like buy cool, then they would try to, and it never worked out. Basically,
no, but not really.
But it works for people like us who like interesting and weird things, because it created a lot of just like okay. I mean, Itoi is probably like the case where it really did work, but that was like a novelist and a writer coming into something, and it's like writing is something that you can put straight into a video game.
Exactly. You can directly apply it. Whereas for music side, anyway, all right. So next up, I wanted to bring up not necessarily an obscure game, but it's one that's interesting because this version is so weird. It's Darius II for Sega Saturn specifically. Have you played this version?
I own it, but I don't know what's different about it.
All right. So what's interesting about this is, the original game in the arcade, it's a multi-screen affair, right?
Yeah.
And most other ports, it's just as you'd expect. They shrink it down. It's 4x3, whatever. You get less playing area visible. For Sega Saturn, though, they said, all right, what if we do this weird mode where it seems to sort of go between interlaced and 240p, but maybe like somehow messing with the way that the screen works to allow you to use the R and L buttons to zoom in and out of the playfield in real time. So if you want to play it full screen 4x3, you can, and when you do that and you move around, the whole screen shifts with your ship in a way, even though it's still the wide playfield. But if you zoom all the way out or anywhere in between, it actually switches the TV, it seems, into like an interlace mode, and you get high-res graphics.
Oh, man.
So you can actually see the full playfield on the Saturn because it can actually do it in high resolution. So it's just like this weird attempt at like bringing one of these multi-screen arcade games home while actually preserving the multi-screen nature of it, which was something I'm not even sure we ever saw again, because... Yeah,
I know that I think you can play it super wide on one of the Taito memories.
Once you get to PS2, yes, the emulation, they just would emulate it and you could do it. It was the same with a Warrior Blade and everything, right? It's not ideal, but it was there. Whereas this was, being an actual port rather than like just an emulator is what makes it so weird, because they had to program in that function to allow you to mess with the screen in real time.
The Saturn is just, I always say that one of the reasons I like it is because in order to make something really good there, you had to do a lot of work, and you can really feel the work in a lot of these Saturn games. You can see the work. And I feel like that ethos just carried across for some reason to where, like with this Darius II port, they're going, yeah, all right, sure, let's do it.
Let's do it. The Saturn supports this. We can do this.
Yeah. No, like what? Only 5 games support high res mode. Sure, let's do it. That's probably an under exaggeration, but
that's massive under exaggeration on Saturn's side. There was a lot of weird high res stuff on the Saturn. They love that. Cool.
It's true. All the photo CD stuff as well.
But yeah, that was cool. But anyway,
moving along with more Saturn, might as well. You might be the person. I don't know if anyone can figure this out. We'll see if someone can tell me that I'm wrong. This is Pup-Breeder. Pup-Breeder is a weird game from Cymate. 1996, November 1996 it came out. It is, I'm pretty sure, because I did some research, asked a bunch of people, tried to figure this out. I'm pretty sure this is the first fully 3D RTS. It has 3D backgrounds and 3D characters. And
what year is it from again?
1996, November 1996. I've found games that have 3D units, but a 2D plane to play on. I've found 3D backgrounds with pre-rendered units, but I haven't found something earlier that was 3D units, 3D background. And there's like no way that it could be true that the first full 3D RTS is this obscure game on the Saturn. Like that's impossible. But I couldn't find anything earlier.
No, that's a really difficult, man, because stuff, you're right. There's plenty of games that have either 3D and 3D characters, 2D backgrounds, or vice versa.
Right. Yeah, but both. Could it possibly be?
I think logically it didn't make sense at the time to do both in most cases because it was drastically limit the number of units you could do on screen. And I think on the PC, at least, where RTS was big, that would have been too big a sacrifice at the time. Yeah. Where it's like, well, that kind of destroys what an RTS is, so they wouldn't even bother with it.
Mm-hmm. And this game, it's more like you have a series of encounters than it is commanding a huge number of units. You only have a few units. You've got like 5 or 6, and the enemies come in little clusters of 3 or 4. And so, they sort of sidestepped that problem by making it a little worse. But if this is really the first full 3D RTS, and it's like a Japan exclusive on a console, that's just so strange. It's just it's fun to think about living in a world where that's true. And I think it might be true. I'm ready to be proved wrong.
This is going to require some additional research.
Absolutely.
I think, in order to discover. Now I must know.
I looked it up for a while, and Pup-Breeder itself, it's fine. It's not great, but it's fun. But it does have it's got a little HUD that shows where all the units are. It's got like the mini map. It has all of the right elements of an RTS. It's just again, you feel like some real sickos made this one. They needed an RTS on their Saturn, and they made it.
Wow, that's so wild. Yep. Okay, well, let's stay with the Saturn then again here. And actually, I want to go with this one here. This isn't that obscure, but the story of how I got it, I think, is fun.
Nice.
So this is the platformer Tryrush Deppy.
Tryrush Deppy,
which is you play as a taxi cab. Mm-hmm. Basically, a cartoonified taxi cab. You see him right there in the front. They have his bumper to look like little hands. Like
he's like Taxi from Who Framed Roger Rabbit is what I always think of when I look at that cover.
That's a great way to describe it. Exactly. Yeah. So it's a weird, fun little game. It's also become rather expensive, I guess, in recent years. It's not a cheap game.
No.
But it was for me, because it was one of those cases where this ended up in a job lot of Saturn games that I got back in like 2005 or something. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I didn't know what it was, and I didn't actually pop it into the system to even try it for like another 5 years.
Nice.
Because I was like, I saw something brought up about this game, and I was like, wait a minute, I think I have that. And I did. And then I actually was like, oh, this is actually pretty fun. But then, obviously realizing like, oh, this was quite basically, I ended up paying less for the entire lot of games than a copy of this goes for.
Yeah. So, you ever have that thing where like you bought a game a long time ago, for whatever reason you didn't play it, and then something comes up and you're like, oh, I think I have that. And then you pick it up but then you realize it's sealed. Does that ever happen to you? And then you're like, what do I do? What do I do? I don't want to be the jerk that doesn't open games, but also when I take the stupid cellophane off of this, it's like worth $300 less.
I know.
And you just like, I don't want to have to think about that. I don't want to have to think about the value plummeting. It's just I do always wind up opening it because I got to stick with my principles. But it does feel. It feels weird.
That happened with a Japanese copy of Croc Pow Pow Island for Saturn, which was also in that lot, randomly sealed. And the sealed copy of that goes for quite a bit. But unsealed, it's not super cheap, but it's definitely a lot less. I popped the seal.
Yeah.
Like I figure I'm not going to sell this, right? Like I don't really sell these types of things. Yeah, and I think this is fascinating. The cover art's like the whole thing is interesting. It's like I'm just going to open it 'cause I want to play it. And I did. So.
One of these days I want to do a show like a collector's conundrum type show where everyone's got like a set amount of virtual money that they can spend, and I confront everyone with a series of purchasing scenarios.
Oh my gosh!
Because I've run into so many of these. Like there was this one time where I saw Blast Wind for the Saturn, which is a pretty pricey game these days. It was sealed in Korea for about half the price that it was going for at the time open.
Oh my gosh!
But the seal had like a little twinged, like there was a little peeled off tiny bit. And I was looking at it and I was like, I can't buy this because the seal is going to be more important to someone else than the game itself. I should buy an open one because I'm going to have to open this. I don't know. I just got into like a weird mental swirly space about that. And I didn't buy it. I did buy the game itself later, but it's just, it was weird.
Oh, that's an interesting conundrum.
Yeah, it's weird. I have a whole list of conundrums for purchases. You can come back for that one.
That's a fun one. Oof, tricky. Yeah. All right.
Okay. What am I going to do? I'm going to do. Actually, I'm going to go with the collector weird collector brain thing. This is not a rare game. There's a couple interesting things about it. This is Galaxy Fraulein Yuna for the PC Engine.
Oh yeah,
we all know about this game.
Yes, of course.
It's a visual novel about a Fraulein in space in the galaxy. She's going around doing things. This particular version is interesting because originally the game was released as a single disc game, and then they re-released it with a second disc, which has the Hue video on it. Hue video being Hudson's video FMV format. So they released it with like how long is it? 5, 10, 15 minute animated intro thing.
Oh my goodness.
And with their video format. And I actually interviewed the guy, and I've never posted it anywhere, but I interviewed the guy who developed the Hue video format because he's actually an American guy who was living in Japan and working at NEC or Hudson. I guess it must have been Hudson. And he developed the format, and it could only because of the nature of streaming it and just the various issues with the hardware. Everything had to be in 6-second chunks. And so they would stitch together series of 6-second chunks. And the real issue was syncing up the audio because the audio didn't have to be in 6-second chunks. And so it was this whole thing. Hue video is really interesting. There's only 3-ish games that use it at all. There is some special internal disc that I don't have that also uses it. But the other reason I want to talk about Galaxy Fraulein Yuna is because I also have the sequel, which I guess I didn't pick up, Galaxy Fraulein Yuna 2. I have the third game on the Saturn.
On the Saturn.
I have the 2 illustration discs on the Saturn, which were from Mika Akitaka, the illustrator of Yuna. So it's like 2 full discs of Yuna illustrated artworks. Then I have the final edition, which is a version of 3 for the PlayStation.
Look at that.
I have the giant Yuna remix, which is the original game redone and remixed on the Saturn with a huge booklet along with it. I also have all the laser discs. There's 5 laser discs. Each has like an etching on it on the because the data is actually only on one side because it's like 25-minute OVA. So they released it one at a time. So the other side has like this cool etching, and they're all the laser discs themselves are pink. It's very cool. And you would think, because I have all this stuff, that I must really like Galaxy Fraulein Yuna. That's what a normal
one would assume.
That's what a normal person would think. But this is where the kind of collector brain feels like a bit of a disease or an addiction or something. because I bought the first one on the PC Engine because it's a PC Engine like staple in a way. And it has the Hue video thing. It's very interesting, whatever. I bought the third game and I bought the sequel because it was on the PC Engine. I bought the third game because it was a tactics version. So I was like, okay, maybe that's cool. But I find with each successive game, the voices they find squeakier, tinier voiced people. It gets like really, really, really annoying and squeaky and obnoxious. But then this big Yuna remix. Oh my gosh. Okay. This huge thing came in just like a lot of games that I bought from a local guy. And so then like at a certain point, you start to realize, oh wow, I have 4 of these. There's not that many more Yuna things that I could buy. And so when that thought enters your mind, and then you happen to see one of the illustration collections in a store, it's like, oh well, might as well just pick it up. Just pick it up. It's not expensive. And then you start to have to like get the rest of them. And so that's what happened. And like the OVAs, I happened to see them in a store in Japan. But I didn't have all of them. I was missing one, and so I had to buy that on eBay for $30. And it's like, do I really want this? Am I ever going to watch it? Why do I have all this stuff? So that's the other reason I wanted to show Galaxy Fraulein Yuna, because it's just like sometimes your brain is just like, what are we doing here?
I love that. It's so good.
What's your next one?
All right, so this is an interesting one. So the Atari Jaguar.
Yes.
I see that you're a big fan. You have it back there. This is a game that was slated for release initially at the time and ended up getting pushed back and came out later. But I think it's one of the most technically advanced games on the system. It's Skyhammer.
Yeah. Skyhammer. Looking at that thing, it's like
barely tell what's on the cover, but
yeah. It's almost not a descent but you're flying around in a ship, and the cityscape is like so Blade Runner-y.
Oh, it's 100% that. I think it was originally called like Cyberpunk City or something originally when they were developing it.
Makes sense.
But it basically, I guess it plays more like a game that would have been contemporary with when it eventually came out versus when it was in development, which is G-Police for PlayStation. It's a lot like that, where you're flying around, you're completing missions, you're in and above the city taking out dudes. So what makes this interesting is, first of all, this is from Rebellion, right? So these guys are still around. They're known for like Sniper Elite and everything now, but they made Alien vs. Predator for the Jaguar. Yeah. Which is kind of like the de facto first-person shooter for the Jag back in the day. Mm-hmm. And it was also pretty impressive looking, I would say, for the system. Yeah. And Skyhammer is kind of like their next generation technology. Really, really, like when you see this thing, like a giant 3D city map with texture maps on the Jag.
Textures especially
is nuts.
Like nobody was really doing textures on the Jaguar. Like the hyper
not like this.
The one where you're a hydrofoil tank. I think I have the CD Hover Strike.
Oh, yeah, Hover Strike,
like
right.
Hover Strike had some textures and stuff. Some of the games had a bit of texture work, but nothing compared to Skyhammer. It really looks, and it looks, because the Jaguar is like barely holding together, it looks different than a PlayStation or a Saturn game somehow.
Totally different.
And it's got this weird like luminosity to it that I can't describe.
So I can actually kind of explain that. It doesn't use RGB. The Jag. It does. I'm forgetting what it's called, but essentially it has. It's like they handle colors where it's like from black. Each one is like black to red, black to green, black to blue. It's something like that where it's like intensity values of the colors rather than like getting white and then more. I can't remember all the details on the top of my head, but the way it handles color is completely different compared to every other machine of that era. So that also limits some of what it can do, but it also means you can do these super smooth gradients. That's why Tempest has those perfect color gradients. And also Doom on the Jag has that perfect fog into the distance, which looks totally different from every other version because of the way the color system works on Jag. So the Jag was actually suited to like really dark stuff because it was not as well suited to like bright white colors and, brights like that. But if you wanted like a deep red that faded to black, then the Jag was your system. It was extremely good at that.
And with Skyhammer, it feels like if you could have taken Skyhammer and finished it, and then you could have taken Black Ice, White Noise and finished that and put them together, then you would have the perfect cyberpunk 90s video game. Because Black Ice, White Noise, for those who don't know, is a third person walk around a city, semi GTA like, where you're like a long haired leather jacket wearing hacker Cyberman. So it's super 90s, but you could go into all the buildings and you could talk to the people in there, and they were all like FMV and animated, and it was a real good try, but it never came out. Yeah,
well, so Skyhammer though did, and thanks to a company still going around, Songbird Productions. But this actually, they got this one out way back in the day. Like I think this was like in the late 90s, maybe, or like it was.
I thought it was even in 2000, but I'm not sure.
Maybe it was 2000. It was. I think they contacted them in the late 90s and probably got it out in the early. But this was one of the earliest attempts at like essentially bringing a Jag game back, and Songbird getting this whole thing of like releasing new games for the Jag. But this one was mostly completed to some degree. Like it's still kind of unfinished, but they did make some progress on it. And some of the things it was intended for is like there was going to be a CD version, which would have been interesting. And there's also support. Well, in the design documents anyway, it talks about support for the Jaguar VR headset.
Oh my!
Which was shown once at eJag Fest. For those who don't know, it is the annual Atari Jaguar Festival here in Europe that occurs, near Cologne, basically. And that whole thing got started because. So according to the creator of eJag Fest, that area of town, there was a warehouse that Atari used for Jaguar consoles that burned to the ground in the 90s. And kids in the neighborhood all basically raided it, and they all got Jaguars. So they're like super into the Jag. So that specific region of Germany is like hardcore Jaguar territory.
That rules.
Everybody had their free Jags, and they still brought some of those flame-kissed melted plastic Jags to eJag Fest just so we could see the remnants. It's pretty special. So the Jag is a weird hole to jump down. I can't say it's a great console, but it sure is an interesting console. Yeah,
Frank on the show at one point was like, for some reason he got roped into doing a Jaguar exhibit for like Portland Retro Gaming Expo, and he hadn't messed with it really, and he'd always heard me talking about it all the time and whatever. I think he was almost like insulted that I had suggested that there was anything redeeming about the Jaguar. Like felt like I had personally misled him. But yeah, you kind of had to be there with the Jaguar. It's just weird. It's fascinating as a project, like a product that's barely holding together. And they kept bolting more stuff onto it. They were like, all right, okay. I know it's not very good now, but what if we add this thing? What if we do 100%. Some more stupid nonsense?
And when you look at the development for it, and a lot of the people working on games for this thing, it was essentially like a consoleized extension of like the Amiga.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of familiar Amiga people close to the Jag, so it has this like weird underground like half-baked like Amiga sequel feel to it.
Very much so.
Where there's not that much good stuff on there, but what's there is like super weird and interesting. And there was some very ambitious things that don't necessarily hold up, but you're like, what the heck? And Black Ice, White Noise, of course, which it's floating out there. There are ways to play it. I've seen it.
There's two different builds. That's builds
right.
that have like different levels of like one part of this build is more complete. One part of that build is more complete. You can't really like stitch it together though.
There's a bunch of Jag stuff like that though, where there's like incomplete versions of varying levels of quality.
Yeah.
But this one might have more features, but it's buggier. And then, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
There's so much of that stuff out there for the Jag.
Yeah.
What a weird machine.
It's great. Once again, great machine for big weirdos.
Extremely.
Speaking of machines for big weirdos, how about colors for the Gizmondo?
Oh, you brought it out. The GTA style game for the Gizmondo.
Yeah. So this also didn't come out. The Gizmondo was a kind of power PC based handheld
money laundering style device.
Money laundering scheme. Sweden's original game console.
Yes.
It's just so weird. I went to like the Gizmondo launch party, and there were these old people that snuck in that said they were from the newspaper, and then had an argument and had to get kicked out. It was just like what a time. But I actually played games on the Gizmondo.
That's incredible.
I did it, and I also dropped my Gizmondo onto the train tracks in San Francisco. Dropped it onto the BART train tracks, and had to call a station attendant. So it got knocked out of my hand when someone was like running into the train, and it slid in between the car doors and down into the thing.
That's like a nightmare.
So I had to call a station attendant over, and I was like, I dropped my game console down there, and he's like, well, what is it? I was like, how can I know what it is? I was like, it's like, just tell me. I was like, it's a Gizmondo. He's like, I know that. No, you don't, dude. There's no way that you know what a Gizmondo is. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Colors is a sort of GTA-like game where you run around and shoot dudes, do little quests, you talk to people. It was basically done. I think it didn't have like a real ending. I think you just got to the end of a thing and then some credits rolled because
and it just stops.
Yeah, it just wasn't. Maybe credits didn't even roll. I don't remember. But I actually played this for like hours.
Holy moly!
And it had a lot of stuff that you could do. In theory, one of the things I did do was you could do tagging. And you could use the Gizmondo's camera because it had a camera and it had like mobile capabilities to take a picture of something, and then you could use your photo to tag around the world. But if you read the back here, it says, form crews with your friends and test your skills against others. Trade or do battle, it's your choice. This is a game for the mobile communication era that utilizes every aspect of the Gizmondo functionality. It will set the standard for innovative games on this platform. I don't know if that online stuff was there at all. I have no idea. There was certainly nobody else to play with or against.
What the heck?
But yeah, it's just, I also still have 2 posters for colors because the PR company, Conky Communications, they were called at the time, they were right near the Game Developer Magazine office. And so I would go over there and, they just had stacks of Gizmondo stuff because nobody wanted it. Just a real weird. There was at one point like a Alien Hominid port. Gizmondo bought Fat Hammer Games and made them do a bunch of stuff. Yeah, crazy times. And Colors was also notable for if you go to jail, you could get out. One of the ways that you could get out of jail was by agreeing to have sex with a hobo. Just a lot of weird stuff in there.
But that checks out. That feels consistent with that era.
That's how it goes.
That's how it was. I assume, on a similar note, you do own a copy of Sticky Balls.
Yeah, I got Sticky Balls.
Okay.
I have a lot of Gizmondo games. I was so close to getting all the unreleased ones, but one of the people at the PR company wanted to like hold them back from me in order to like get a feature in Game Developer Magazine, but that's not how it works. So, and then he left the company, and I don't know whatever happened to those other unreleased games.
Oh man!
But I got like half of them.
That's oof.
I know.
That's pretty sick. I must say.
Good time. Okay.
Well, since we're talking about obscure consoles, I figure we should talk about the PlayStation 2 next.
Heard of that one?
This is one that I've talked about this recently, but I'm so fascinated by its existence, and it's phase paradox.
Yes.
So, which is essentially a sequel to Philosoma on PlayStation. Yeah. Philosoma being a shooter. It was known for it's a 2D style shooter, but the way it changes is that as the levels progress, it changes perspectives. Yeah. So sometimes it's side view, sometimes it's vertical, sometimes it's like into the camera, sometimes it's away from the camera. And I assume you're reaching up to grab
I'm reaching up to grab the Philosoma official art book.
So right there, that and the ending
of
Philosoma and everything.
Unfortunately, I don't have it, but it came with a movie CD-ROM.
See, when you see this and then you see Face Paradox, it's like, wait a minute. Like, they really wanted to do something with this universe for some reason.
They had so much stuff. Like, there's, when you look in this art book.
Oh my goodness, look at that.
There's like so much art, but there's also just all this. I mean, there's story in there, but there's just so much. It's amazing how much they were trying with this.
And that's why Face Paradox is such a weird situation, because it comes out years later. It's on PlayStation 2 instead of PS1. It is a direct sequel in that the story continues directly where Philosoma lets up, except for this time it's an adventure game.
It's an adventure game, and it's basically like a walking sim because there's no combat.
There's no real combat in it. It actually, to me, it feels more like, a little bit like stuff like what Telltale would go on to do. Mm-hmm. Or like Until Dawn.
Yeah.
That whole genre where you're like experiencing a story, you're exploring it. It's like pure atmosphere, kind of vibey, going around this sort of like sci-fi environment. But it does some neat stuff that I really like, where first of all, it looks pretty darn good. And it's nice to see. So pre-rendered backgrounds were huge during the PS1 era, but once you get to PS2, they were a lot less common. And sometimes when they were used, it was, like Shadow Hearts uses them, but that game was, I think, originally for PlayStation, so the backgrounds are all like 240p res.
Yeah.
But Face Paradox uses high res backgrounds, so they're like super sharp, and you don't see that often with pre-rendered stuff. And more importantly, there is zero pause between screen flips, so it's like instant, which makes it actually start to feel more real time. Especially when they do the cutscenes, because every cutscene, they actually bring the camera down like a normal cinematic. And you're like, okay, they're showing the 3D models. It's cool. Except for they also had to have specific bespoke pre-rendered backgrounds behind the characters that were like out of focus, like a camera.
Mm-hmm.
And so they put a ton of pre-rendered backgrounds into this. And one of the characters looks like a low budget cosplay Chris Redfield, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're like exploring the station. Production value seems super high for this kind of era, and yet it never left Japan.
No, and I don't think
confused by that.
I don't know if anyone cared about it there either.
No, but it's a Sony first-party game. That's the thing, which is why I was surprised that it never actually got a chance anywhere else.
Yeah, I know a guy who worked on it. He went on to work on dinosaur hunting on the Xbox.
Oh, yes.
And he had worked on the J-League Soccer series on the Saturn previous to that. It's a weird one, but I didn't think about this, but maybe this is an answer to an earlier question that I had. So, Dino Crisis 2 has pre-rendered backgrounds, but Dino Crisis 1 is full 3D.
Full 3D.
And I was trying to think if there's any other game where the sequel has pre-rendered backgrounds and the original is full 3D. And this is maybe cheating because it's a genre hop. Yes. But Philosoma to Phase Paradox maybe is, but those backgrounds, I can't remember if they are full 3D or if they did something extra weird there.
On Philosoma?
Yeah, Philosoma.
No, they're full polygon.
Okay, all right. Well, I guess maybe technically.
It technically does count in that sense.
Yeah, I gotta get the CD with the movie for this Philosoma.
Yeah, I want to see
thing.
that.
Yeah, I didn't realize that I didn't have it when I bought this. I was like, oh, this is cheap, and that was the reason. Yeah, that's a cool game. I just love stuff like that. That's another example of the like, let's try it kind of spirit that existed, because they're like, oh, we got all this material, we got so much stuff with this universe. Let's just make another one.
Let's just do it.
Yeah. Okay, PS2? Sure. Let's do a PS2 game. I'm not sure which of these I'm really gonna... Oh, here. This will be the featured one. Hanuman, Boy Warrior.
That's a European case.
This is a European case.
I recognize
but
that.
This is an Indian game.
No way.
There are several games. I have about 7 that were Indian exclusive.
That's awesome.
Developed in India for the PS2 and PSP, and pretty late era as well. So I'm showing Hanuman Boy Warrior because that's the one that I've actually played significantly. But there's also Chandragupta Warrior Prince, Hanuman was 2009, Chandragupta was 2011, and then we have Raw One, the game. This was a licensed game for a popular movie at the time in India. That's also 2011, and then we have
2011, I love it.
And then we have Dawn 2, also licensed based on the an Indian movie. This one is 2013 on the PS2.
No freaking way.
Very late on the PS2. So these games are not amazing, but the fact that they exist is amazing.
I love that.
And they have English translations and stuff because they were kind of also meant for export. But as in India, English is kind of the common language between the various states that all speak dozens of languages. So there's like a Desi Games thing, which is traditional street games and stuff. There's 2 cricket games, a lot of interesting stuff. And I purchased these all in India. I had to just scour the streets looking for video game stores, and it was really hard to find this stuff. And
I bet
this was maybe 2018, so these games weren't even that old. Some of the PSP ones I was able to get at a Sony store in Hyderabad.
What the heck?
Yeah, so there's official Sony stores, and they still had PSPs and some PSP games there.
That's
brand new.
That is a trip.
Yeah, and some of them were brand new in very scare quotes. They just had a little sticker across the
I see
the case, but it was really cool to see I love to see a kind of nascent industry grow in the console space. Didn't last, but it's just a really neat relic.
While you were talking, I pulled up footage of Raw 1, the game.
Yeah.
It seems to run mostly in the 15, 10 FPS range with constant screen tearing.
There is a PS3 version of Raw 1 that runs a lot better. But that one's even more hard to find, and I don't have it because I don't know.
Raw 1.
I'm probably not gonna play through Raw 1.
It looks like Power Stone.
Yeah, it's
mixed with Tron or something.
It's very Tron. A lot of Tron vibes.
All right. It is truly the Raw 1.
Yes.
All right. I want to highlight this just because I've always had a fascination with this game, and this version is also fascinating. It's Beavis and Butthead in Virtual Stupidity.
Yes.
The PlayStation version.
Yeah.
So for whatever reason,
PlayStation is Japan exclusive.
Yes, Japan exclusive. So maybe it's because of PC cost or whatever, but there was a number of PC style adventure games that ended up getting Japanese ports.
Yeah.
That were only in Japan, and this is one of
weird. Who put those out again?
It depends. Some of them were River Hill Soft. This one says B Factory Company and Gaga Communication.
B Factory Company.
So, first of all, the game itself, it's amazingly cool. It's a point and click adventure game, as you do, popular at the time in the 90s, but it's actually very competently done. It feels very much in the style of what LucasArts had done during that era, but Beavis and Butthead, and so the idea of going around a graphic adventure and clicking on things and having Beavis and Butthead react to it, I think is quite good. That is a fun idea for a video game, and it does work very well. When they brought it to Japan, though, they decided, we should dub this.
Yeah.
And the dub is in itself also extremely interesting because, it's Japanese people trying to sound like Mike Judge doing Beavis and Butthead, and it's weird.
Well, I was looking at this game a couple months ago, as one does, and I wasn't sure whether Beavis and Butthead had otherwise come to Japan.
Exactly.
So I'm unclear whether was this people's first like real intro to Beavis and Butthead there, or did they have existing voice actors they could pull from? I'm unclear on that, but it was fun to think about.
Yeah, they mentioned MTV on the back of the popular characters from the MTV anime, Beavis and Butthead.
MTV
but I'm
anime.
like, wait, was MTV even like a known thing?
Yeah.
I don't like the whole situation is weird. And on top of that, the copy I got came with 2 discs. Because but 2 of this, it's the same disc. It's only a 1-disc game, but it came with 2 copies in one case. Which is also what happened with my copy of Way of the Warrior, which came with both the POW and NTSC versions in the same case.
Oh, wow.
And I never figured out why.
Yeah.
So, yes.
It's funny when that stuff happens. I was at a store in San Jose, South Bay, California here, and they had a Japanese copy of Gate of Thunder, which is a relatively pricey game. The Japanese version, for whatever reason, is kind of expensive.
Gate of Thunder for
PC Engine.
I love that game.
But then I picked it up and I'm like, oh, this is a bootleg. And I brought it over to them and I was like, just making sure that you guys know that this is a bootleg. And the guy opens up and he's like, no way, both discs are here. It's a 1-disc game. And there were mysteriously 2 discs there with 2 different labels on them, both of which said Gate of Thunder. I don't know what was going on, but it was some kind of weird custom boot that somebody had made. Shouldn't be no 2 discs in there. But yeah, that Beavis and Butthead is a neat one, and I keep thinking, should I own this? That's again the collector brain. Why do I need that?
Because it's actually good.
Yeah, it's actually good. But
if you want to play it, though, just play the original.
Exactly.
I mean, Japanese voice acting is entertaining, but it's hard to replace Mike Judge in those roles.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But it is very interesting to. It's a totally different way to experience it if you love that game, I guess.
Well, even reference So Gay right on the back. It's wonderful. It is not, though. It is a good game.
No, it's good. Okay, I guess I got 2 left.
2 more.
So I got to choose wisely. Okay, I'm going to do a quicker one here. This is Asuka 120% special Burning Fest, which is a good game for the PlayStation. It's not my favorite version.
It's different. I have Final.
Yeah, Final. Yeah, so Special has wound up becoming the version that they play in Japan for the small tournaments that they do. Over here in the West, it's Limit Over that we do. And Limit Over, as you may know, so Asuka 120% Limited was the Saturn version, and then Limit Over was the version that the developers made on their own, which you had to burn to a disk and mod your system in order to play. But they put it out because they wanted to add some characters, they wanted to do some fixes. And this game is not, and that is not the only time they did it, because they also did it here. So this version on my left has a black dot after the word Burning Fest.
Oh, I see it, yeah.
This one on the right has a red dot. Oh, sorry, they both have red dots, but there's a black dot after the red dot on this one version. The one with the black dot after it is actually an update. It's essentially a patch where they tweaked some moves, they added some things here and there. They just like did some finessing because I guess maybe they sold enough to do another print run or something. They just put out another one. And so you wind up, I didn't even know, as an Asuka fan, I didn't even know about this until a few years ago.
That's nuts, dude.
Yeah, so if you're ever looking for Asuka 120% special, Burning Fest special, look for the black dot, because that's the one that they actually play now in the tournaments.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's also worth noting that this series has incredible music from Keishi Onao-san.
Yeah.
Who, super nice dude. I was able to go drinking with him back in September, and just a very humble dude who's created some amazing music, but I don't think his music really penetrated much into US released games. So if you've not heard some of the stuff that he did, like Manstalker, Asuka, various others, I suggest going to listen to it because it is freaking fantastic.
Yeah, and amazingly, so Asuka 120%, that whole series, there's like 8 games or so. If you include the ports, there's even more, and they all use his soundtrack. Like some of them are remixed, but they all use the same song, and it's pretty wild. They got a lot of bang for their buck out of that poor guy.
I was gonna say, they paid him for that, and it's like, all right, well, we got this music.
Yep, yeah, I've actually got the FM Towns version up here that comes with an original single CD as well.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, he's very good. And also, if you do wind up listening to the Mad Stalker soundtrack, the easiest one to get is the Mega Drive one, but I highly recommend the PC Engine version of the Mad Stalker soundtrack. Very good.
And look out for Asuka 120% on Mega Drive, I believe.
Coming soon.
Happening soon, so that should be awesome.
Yeah, we'll all be playing some Asuka. Okay.
All right. So this one is not super obscure, but I wanted to highlight it because I think people might have missed it for a reason. So ActRaiser 2 gets a lot of shit, and rightfully so to some degree. But the Super Famicom version of ActRaiser 2 is absolutely worth playing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this is not super well talked about, but it's actually playable. So the US version has that thing going on where they make it extra hard for the US market to ensure that you can't rent it and beat it during a rental.
Right.
Obviously, part of the thing with this game is they took out the strategy sections, and that's a shame. The strategy stuff was very cool. It was a very quintet thing to do.
Yeah.
But ActRaiser 2 itself is still an absolutely gorgeous game. And it's conceptually anyway, it seems like a cool action side-scrolling platformer. The problem with the US version is it's so brutally hard that it's not fun.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's genuinely not fun. It's way, 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 way too hard. Japanese version, though, is extremely playable. It is much easier. It is not easy, but it actually is now a playable game. It's like there's scenarios where in the US version you get hit and you basically lose all but like one tick of life and you're pretty much dead. Or in the Japanese version, it takes off just one tick. Stuff like that, where it's super unfair and not fun. And now it actually is. So if you've ever been curious about this game and you're like attracted to the visuals, the music and everything, the Super Famicom version is the one to check out because it is genuinely a cool action platformer. And I bet most people have not played it just because of that horribly difficult US version.
Yeah. It makes me think of Automodelista, where they tweaked the handling of the cars for the US version so that it was really hard to play.
Yeah,
Which
exactly.
I don't think that's what they wanted to do, but that's what they wound up with. And then a lot of people don't realize that the Japanese original is a much more playable, manageable game. And Automodelista obviously looks fantastic. And
it does.
You want it to be fun. And so if you want it to be fun, try the Japanese version.
I think the Japanese version is considered too easy to win races. And I can concur with that, but it's actually fun.
Yeah.
Whereas the US version is not very fun at all.
Yeah. I'd rather have it be an easy, cool driving experience than be sliding around.
Yeah. And unfortunately, everything else, only that initial Japanese release of Automodelista was like that. They did the US version and then they did like US tuned version re-release in Japan. And then they got ported to Xbox and GameCube as well, I believe. And those are also based in the US.
Yep. So you have to buy the original PS2 version, I think.
That's That's the one. And unfortunately, that's missing. They added a couple tracks to the US version as well, and those are not in the Japanese one, but it's much more fun, I think, anyway.
That's why I have both.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. And you can kind of mentally make it work by having the US GameCube one and the Japanese PS2 one. Like at least I'm spreading it around. Okay, I guess it's my last one. And so for my last one, I'm going to go with Manic Game Girl. You know this one?
Ooh, I don't know this one.
This is definitely a curiosity. 2002 PlayStation 1 game from Korea. It is
nice.
I think the only Korean-developed, Korean-exclusive PlayStation 1 game.
That's so cool.
It is in Korean. And it's directed by a guy who worked on Parasite Eve previously. And then after he made this one game in Korea, he's a Korean guy. After he made this one game in Korea, he went to the US and he wound up working on The Saboteur. But he was mostly like a graphics programmer type guy. and this was his only directing role, at least according to Moby Games. And it is a full 3D walk around, go into different areas, talk to people, plan your schedule. You turn into like a magical girl to fight things. And you have this like Game Boy thing that's a HUD. They were just trying so much stuff, and there's like you're on a kind of like a game college campus, and there's a full campus that you can walk around and talk to people. Me and my friend Chaz were trying to play it when he was over at my house using a translator and like translation app, and it was we were able to get through it. It's a very interesting, ambitious, not great game.
I just want to know how they actually got into developing for that, because if there was no real Korean market for PlayStation and there was no development environment there, like how did they get the dev kits and like the ability to like put it out officially like this?
Mm-hmm. And this is what makes me wonder if it was like his Square Enix experience. He goes back to Korea and he's like,
let's try
to make it go. But I've never talked to the guy. I would love to track him down. It also is like, I don't know, for whatever reason, this sticks out at me. It says library programs 1993 to 2002, Sony Computer Entertainment. I guess that, like, why did they? Not all games say that on the back.
No.
I just wonder. I wonder if there's something there. But you know, in the PS2 era, there were more Korean exclusive games. People were getting dev kits. You know, you could go to Yongsan, where they sold a lot of games for the weirdos and stuff. And they used to have like a big banner for that driving game Apex for PS2.
Wait, Apex was for Xbox. Are you talking about Axel Impact?
I'm talking about Axel Impact. Sorry, thanks.
Which became DT Racer.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I meant. See? But like, who else is going to be able to correct me on that?
Indeed.
That's why we're doing this. Yeah, Manic Game Girl, it's real neat. It's not good, but it's neat. That's what I love.
That is cool. That's super cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to pick one because it's like a strange kind of situation that kind of would only happen in... Okay, so this is Chiki Boys, US version for Mega Drive, right?
Yeah.
Or Genesis, right? Mm-hmm. But it's a sealed copy. This is one of the few games I have sealed. And the reason... So I actually have a Japanese version that I can play. But the reason I keep this one sealed is because I think the way it ended up here is interesting. So there's some small retro shops in this area, including a couple. There's one called Kuschelmuschel, one called Kuschelmuschel Reloaded. And they're run by the same family, and they're down the street from each other. And apparently, I guess, whatever happened, they ended up... One of the people involved split off and opened up Reloaded, which is like an offshoot of it. And they live in the same small town. It's like an hour outside of Frankfurt, like in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
And they run this retro shop that's been there for like 30 something years. Right. Also, not too far from here, there's the Rammstein military base that, where run by, America. Right.
Yeah.
On base, they have the PX or whatever, they sell American goods, I guess, there, and including video games. But what happens when you try to sell a bunch of video games and then you end up not selling all of them? You got to get rid of them somehow.
Yeah.
So at some point, these guys bought up essentially new old stock from the military base.
Oh, wow.
And put it in their shop. And I only hold this up as one of many, 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 many examples. If you want sealed 3DO games, 3 sealed Sega Saturn US games.
Oh my goodness.
All this stuff, they had it. And I bought a lot of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
what time period are we talking about when they had this stuff?
Probably about 5 years ago.
That's pretty recent, all things considered.
Right? So it's fairly recent. They just had, first of all, because it's out in the middle of nowhere, there's not that as much interest, I think, in like US stuff. Like, there's a lot of PAL stuff, and that tends to be what sells in those kind of small markets. But they have, import NTSC stuff. But just these types of things. And what's crazy, though, is that the prices on this, like this Chiki Boys, it was like $40.
Yeah.
I got like an Atomic Runner sealed from them as well for like the same. They're not that expensive.
Yeah.
But the actual like online prices for this, for sealed copies of this, is way, 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 way higher.
Oh, certainly. I think I was lucky to get a cart only copy of Cheeky Cheeky Boys with somebody's name written across it in Sharpie for around $40.
Exactly.
And I was like, wow, I got a deal.
So that's what makes this shop and these situations so interesting to me. Just walking in there and being like, wait, what? Like, why do they have? And that's what it turned out to be. It's just like they bought a job lot from an American military base with unsold inventory that was in the PX during the 90s.
Man.
And they sell it all.
That's good stuff.
So yeah, I got a sealed copy of Quarantine for 3DO. I got a Return Fire Maps O' Death sealed copy for 3DO.
I don't have the Maps of Death.
A bunch of Saturn stuff. And
it's have the regular Return Fire.
And so it's wild. That was one of the most amusing like retro shopping experiences I had over here. It's just like uncovering a treasure trove of American 90s games still sealed just because they didn't sell.
Yeah, I have a sealed copy of Command and Conquer for Saturn.
Okay.
And I've kept it sealed because the guy who gave it to me worked with Lewis Castle at a later company, and he had been at Westwood and just had all these copies and just gave them to employees.
Okay.
And so since it was like passed down from the guy who did it, it just felt like, I don't know, I should leave this how it is. Gotta leave it how it is. I almost brought a sealed game from when I bought 100 sealed TurboGrafx games because it was
one of the soccer games or a wrestling game.
Yeah, it was TV, sports, hockey, and football.
Oh yeah, 50
or like it was like I think it's 98 copies that I have, and it's like 40 whatever of each. Just ridiculous, 49 of each. Why do I have that? Sometimes if something falls into your lap and you're like, okay, I gotta have these. Put them in my house. Ridiculous.
I love it.
Well, this has been fun.
Indeed.
It's always hard to know when to stop. I'm glad we put a limit at 10 so that we couldn't keep going forever.
Exactly.
But yeah, so this has been this. I'm sure there'll be a good video version of this as well, which Esper will work on. Anything you want to plug before you go?
I mean, just keep an eye out for more stuff on DigitalFoundry, and if you haven't played RZ the Jewel of Faramore, which is our loving tribute to the CDI Zelda games, go check that out as well. It's pretty rad and totally weird.
Yeah, it's definitely an odd one.
Yes, that was the goal.
Yeah,
odd but good. Hopefully,
you were involved with that somehow.
Yeah, I did a lot of level 1 game design work on that, and also a voice for a character.
Very good.
So
yeah, I was unaware of that part. Frank played through the whole thing. He loved it.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, so it'll probably be coming up in our Game of the Year episode. Well, I don't want to. I don't want to promise that, but Frank only plays a few games every year, and we're all supposed to bring in 7. So I think he's played 8 games. So unless
let's see if it makes the cut.
yeah. If it's the one that doesn't show up, that'll be very, very personally insulting, I suppose. Well, thanks all for listening. If you enjoyed this or any other episode of the show, please rate the show, subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/insertcredit. Come to the forums, hang out. We have a good time over there. What else? This episode is edited by Esper Quinn with music by Kurt Feldman. And I think that's all I got to say. I'm Brandon Sheffield. You can say you're John Lennon.
I'm John Linneman.
There, he did it. And your game has now been saved. We made an episode all by ourselves. Okay, that's it. We did it. Thanks.
That was fun.
It was fun. Thanks for agreeing to do this.
Of course, that's a good idea.
Yeah, we should do. We'll do another one in some amount of time. Whenever we can muster a new idea for a theme, or maybe we can just do this again. But
just riff on it.
Yeah. Maybe we could choose a theme like games for platforms that we're less familiar with. Or something. We'll think about it.
Getting more obscure stuff in there is always fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Games that games that were bundled with accessories. I don't know.
Oh man, yeah, that would be great because I could bring in 2 games that I worked on.
Oh hell yeah!
That are very obscure and came with accessories. And are now one of them is like crazy expensive with the accessory.
Oh boy!
And one of them came out only in France.